So many people want to take the test of English as a foreign language, and this is a reading passage with some questions that are similar to the ones that are on the TOEFL, known as the test of English as a foreign language. So we're going to read this, and as you're reading, try to highlight specific points. I think you can highlight even if it is an online test. If it's a paper test, you can underline. If you can't, you can try to write notes in the side. Write notes on the side of the passage when you're actually taking the exam. So here we are. A commonly referenced time for the Great Depression in America occurred in the early 1930s. Yet, there was a prior depression that bankrupted the American South during and after the Civil War. Therefore, this depression occurred in the late 1800s. By 1866, many Northern Americans traveled to the South to spearhead economic growth. Many of the people who moved from North America to Southern America received the nomenclature of carpetbagger. Many of these carpetbaggers were not just persons who wanted to exploit the Southerners' loss of war. They were also persons who attempted to rebuild the Deep South. Local and state government officials rebuilt banks, hospitals, restaurants, and other institutions in the hopes of stimulating the economy. Unfortunately, many of the carpetbaggers also received another denigrating term, scalawag, due to Northerners in the South supporting civil rights. These rights directly challenged former Southern political culture, although the South was re-envisioned. Many former slaves and Northern supporters of freed blacks elected former slaves to state offices and to local offices. The economy rose, yet many people feared the New South, and legislation signed by former United States President Andrew Johnson in 1866 eradicated much of the progress. However, many blacks remained wealthy, and many Northerners remained in Alabama, Georgia, Mississippi, North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, and Louisiana. The South did rise again, although the way it rose was against many former Southerners' desires. The next major economic depression occurred in the 1930s. Employers, in an attempt to save money, laid off workers. Bank administrators, previously engaged in liberal lending, stopped loaning money, and simultaneously bank consumers stopped placing money in savings accounts. Many business owners asked for governmental assistance. Under the term too big to fail, President Hoover coined this phrase, and he established money for farmers and businesses business owners who were failing. The Reconstruction Finance Corporation, RFC, administrators authorized over $2 billion to help unions focus on helping workers get back to work. FDR authorized the New Deal for a failing nation. He established the works in progress so that artists, including authors, could receive payments other than selling to people on the street. So let's take a minute and go over this passage. We have some terms here that we need to look at. Scalawag might be that the author might ask you something about this. Spearhead, if you're not familiar with these terms or how they're used. And also, there's another term here that was used, and that term was coined. Okay, so coin this phrase, and as you know, a coin is actually something that is in your hand, but the way that this is used, it's quite different. You also have a footnote here, and that's so the author doesn't feel that she's, stealing, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. So we need to get workers to work in a speech in 1934, but a lot of other people currently say that here in the United States now. So let's move on. The current depression may not be the last one in the United States, but in 2026, the unemployment rate is 4.3. In 2025, the unemployment rate was 4.2, which was down by 0.04%, so not quite just a little bit under 4% from 4.6. While these rates appear low, 7,370,000 people are unemployed. This amount appears low because 345 billion people live in the United States. However, these numbers are accompanied by rising crime and unapologetic homelessness. The millennial depression occurred after a series of inflation accrued since the 1990s and lingered into the current years. This depression continues in 2026, but the depression is hidden in lowered unemployment rates while the homelessness supposedly decreased. The homeless rate is 18%. This rate has increased from 2024, but it is reported by only 2% of an increase. This means that a staggering 62,100,000 people were without housing, and within 2 years, an increase of 2% means that another 200,000 persons are without shelter. Without a work in progress or a solution to solve the conditions of unemployment and homelessness, the problem continues. Therefore, the current depression continues. So right here, the author is pretty explicit in ending that she believes the current depression is still here. Okay, and then there are solutions that she thinks, like there's not a work in progress, kind of is saying there's nothing here to stop this from going on. Let's move on to our questions now. Okay, so now when we look at this question, this is considered to be an inference question because it's not directly stated. And this is a section on the TOEFL, and to be honest with you, it's a section on most reading comprehension test inferences, which means that you have to infer or go back and think about what the author is actually stating. And you have to read through this and look at some of the words here. So I'm going to go into the third sentence, first paragraph. Spearhead the economic growth. Okay, so North Americans came up, spearheaded economic growth, and they were called carpetbaggers, or called a carpetbagger, nomenclature of a carpetbagger. Okay, and remember, carpet is something on the floor, but they're putting the carpet in their bag and walking away with it. In fact, if you look it up, which you won't be able to look these terms up during the test, but if you look it up, it means you put something in your carpet and you keep going. And so then it uses this word exploit, which usually has a derogatory meaning. Exploit Southerners' loss of the war. They attempted to rebuild the South. And if you know the history of America's 1860s, 1870s, 1880s, 1890s South, a lot of people are very angry over the progress. Slavery was over. And here's the funny part, slavery is never mentioned. So you're going to have to put all that together and think about what this term would mean if you've never heard of it. If you took some American history, you probably do know what it means. But anyway, Southerners wanted Northerners to support their cause for war. You need to take this out immediately. The war was over. And it says during and after. So it tells you. So that wouldn't be a good choice. Southerners wanted the Northerners to leave. They did, but they didn't have to call them a name for that. So this is too broad. Southerners did not like the fact that Northerners were able to come to the South and make money. Might be a possibility. And Southerners did not enjoy Northerners who mocked them. This is super odd, too. It never said that they came out and publicly ridiculed, laughed at, or mocked them. You know, they might have been just people like, hey, we have this opportunity, and we can, get something for us, land real cheap, and go on ahead and do this thing, and, do all of this. And so, here's what happened. So here's your inference, and it's almost kind of directly stated, but it kind of isn't. So there's the answer to your first question. Okay, when you look at the next video, you will move on, and there will be other questions on the same passage.